All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are very pleased to be joined in this episode of the Sens Nation podcast by former Ottawa Senator Brendan Bell. Brendan, how are you doing today?
Doing just fine. A little warm, to be
Yeah.
honest. It's this is a little much for me. Still carrying around a few extra pounds from after my playing career, so I get hot. I get warm in weather like this.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. Like these last 2 days have been just bananas. Like spring is a lie in our hometown in the city
Yeah.
of Ottawa, I think, when you get down to it. But yeah, so let's get into things. Find out what's going on, maybe an update on Brendan Bell's life. Like what's going on with you these days?
You can catch me pretty much anywhere up and down the 401 or I-81 in a hockey rink in Rochester, New York, Whitby, Oakville. I got three kids, 14, 12, and 10, who are all playing spring hockey, and two girls and a boy. And so we've been all in on shuttle driving, taxi driving, coaching, a lot of time in rinks.
So give me the ratio of it's an absolute joy to rolling your eyes like crazy at the whole minor hockey coach dad experience.
Well, I think you picked the wrong day because just trying to scramble around and figure out what my weekend looks like coming up, it's not as much of a joy as, most of the time it's a 10 on 10. Like I absolutely love it. I've re-fallen in love in the game, fallen in love with the game after, when I was done playing, I kind of thought like, I'm just going to hang these skates up and we'll just, step away for a little while. But as my kids have gotten more into it, I've coached for the last 7 or 8 years, and I love it. I mean, I really do love it. And it's a little hectic, and running kids around and practice plans and all kinds of stuff going on. But I honestly wouldn't trade it for the world.
When you think back to your NHL career, like, does it feel like what stays with you? Like, was it a whirlwind for you? Is it something you look back on fondly? Maybe a sort of a general sense of your NHL career, which included a stop in Ottawa, and how you feel about it these days, all these years later.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely something that I look back upon fondly. There were times throughout my career where I wasn't happy with the way things were playing out, where I wasn't happy with the breaks I was getting, the opportunities I was getting, getting stuck in the minors, going overseas, feeling like you're kind of just off the track, if you will. But then you get some perspective, and it's now been, geez, I don't think it's been quite 10 years, but coming up on 10 years out. And I am so thankful and grateful for all the opportunities that I had. And I really wouldn't change anything. If you asked me when I was 20 years old, what's your professional career going to look like? And I would have probably said, 800 games, over 1,000 games, probably 400 points, make a whole bunch of money. Didn't
Easy
really go that
peasy.
way. Yeah, nothing to it. Everything's coming up roses so far. But I played 13 years professionally. Probably got up around that 800 to 1,000 game mark in all kinds of leagues all across the world. But again, I wouldn't trade it. There's nothing that I would go back and say, man, I wish I had done something different, or I wish to me, it's all part of the journey and all part of the experience, really. And I could not have had an experience like that if I didn't go through some of the tough times too. So I'm super, super grateful for what, the path that hockey has provided me and put me on.
You were a third round draft pick of the Toronto Maple Leafs. And as we speak right now, we are getting ready for the 2025 NHL draft. For those schlepperocks like me who love the game, played the game my whole life, never at a high level, no one ever considered getting me on anybody's draft radar at any level, junior B, whatever the lowest draft level there is. What is it like, in the days leading up to an NHL draft? Can you give us sort of a feel for what a player might be feeling right now?
Yeah, it's a whirlwind. I mean, I can give you my experience, and we can talk about some of the guys that I played with, and what their experience would have been like. Spez was a good friend of mine as an 18-year-old, and it was Spez and Kovalchuk. They were going to go number one or number two. Their draft experience was a hell of a lot different than mine was. And I was going to go anywhere from 20th overall to, I thought, about 50th or so. I ended up falling to 65. But so it was you go to the draft and you don't know what to expect, and your whole family's there. And I got three younger brothers and sisters, and we kind of just, packed up the van, and everybody's down there. And then LA wants to meet with you, and then Florida wants to meet with you, and then did you bring running shoes, and can you actually do a workout for Florida wants to see you at 3 o'clock this afternoon, and it's a whirlwind. And then you show up to the draft on, thank God, my draft was the first 3 rounds on Friday night. I didn't know if I was going in the first round, but I hoped I might, and so showed up at the rink on Friday night, and then waited there for about 5 hours with a camera on me for 3 of them, waiting to get drafted, and it just kept on sliding it in. So, draft was not a happy experience for me, or as happy as it probably should have been. But again, it like perspective is everything, and it didn't take very long for Pat Quinn was the head coach of the Maple Leafs when I was drafted. I drafted Toronto, and we all go up to the suite, and you're introduced to everybody and all the scouts and all the general managers and assistant general managers, and there wasn't nearly as many as there are now with most clubs, but it was immediately. Pat Quinn said, like, first round pick, third round pick, I don't care, you're here, and now the work begins. And I talk to young players now, and fortunate to be around the rinks a lot with kids that have been drafted, OHL, NHL, all kinds of things, and it's the exact same thing that I pass on to them. Like, you've achieved something now, but you really haven't achieved anything yet. You just got your name in the paper, and you're just going to get started to get patted on the back. But now's where the hard work begins, because there's so many kids that play this game, and so many good kids, and it just continues to get more talented, that there's always somebody better, and there's always somebody coming for. And a lesson that I probably learned the hard way my first couple of years pro was there's always somebody coming for your job, and you never know where they might be coming from. When you're a third round pick, the first round pick and the second round pick probably get more opportunity than you do, but that fourth round pick might be pretty good, and the fifth round pick might be pretty good, and they might pick up somebody off waivers, and there might be a trade, and who knows what might happen. So just put the work boots on and do what you can.
I am so done with old school Christmas lights. The tangling, the burning out, the minus 30-degree installation dangling from a ladder. Goodbye Christmas lights. Hello Celebrite, your permanent holiday lighting solution. I've got them on my home right now. When it's daylight, they're absolutely invisible. But at nighttime, things come to life. Right now, with the beautiful weather, we're looking forward to Canada Day. And of course, the classic colors of Christmas. You can really make the lights dance, all controlled from your smartphone. And on those nights when there is no occasion or holiday, you can roll with just a beautiful, subtle white light. And the installation team from Celebrite Ottawa was fantastic. So you can keep on rolling with old school Christmas lights, or you can contact them today at celebrite.ca. Yeah. But the draft is happening on Friday. Kind of a weird one where they've decentralized things, where all the teams are going to be making their picks from their home cities. Top 50 guys will be in Los Angeles for it. So a little unusual this year. So what are you doing if you're Steve Staios?
Yeah, I mean, I would typically always say go best player available. From the minute, unless you're maybe drafted in the top 5. In which case, but we've seen, with the Senators over the last number of years, you draft in the top 5, you get 2 of those picks, you take the best player available, and they will both work out pretty good. But unless you've got a generational talent or a couple of generational talents at 1, 2, and you got to decide, well, geez, do we have a hole at center, or are we weaker on the back end? Then it can. But I think when you get to spot number 21, you take the best player available. That player is probably not stepping into your lineup next year, probably not even the year after that. So who knows what your roster is going to look like and what that makeup is going to be? Who knows what that player, how quickly that player is going to develop, what their strengths are going to be, what that development curve is going to look like when they arrive in the NHL. So to me, it's restock that cover. I think that you take as many good players as you can, and let your scouts, let your development staff, let everybody work on it, and try to turn these players into NHL players.
Can I suggest that the Sens drafted for need last year? Carter Yakimchuk, he went 7th overall to the Sens, and most people had him probably 5 or 6, 7 picks later than that. Like he looked exactly like what they needed in the here and now. That big right shot defenseman. Can we maybe Steve Staios was looking at both columns when he made that selection? What did you think?
Yeah, I thought it was kind of both. I mean, when his name came off the board, I thought, geez, that's a bit of a stretch. Like there's other players out there who are right shot. I look at somebody like Zane Parekh, who put up huge numbers in junior, right shot defenseman. But then, as the year went on, and obviously both players not getting invited to the Team Canada selection camp, and then Parekh getting added after the fact, I like the choice of Yakimchuk over Parekh. Like I think that you can't teach size, the skating ability that both these players have. Like they're both super, super skilled juniors and have put up great numbers offensively. Both skate really, really well. But I think you got to project out, and sometimes. Like I look at Jason Bucala's, I look at Craig Buttons, I look at Sam Cosentino's, like the draft lists, and it's interesting to me that they're similar but they're different, and so Steve Staios and his staff have a different take on like everybody's got their lists, and the lists sometimes look similar, but a lot of the times they'll have seen a player where he had a great night or a great playoff series in some remote arena that there was nobody else in the rink, and they saw something that just clicked, or they talked to somebody, talked to a defense coach that they don't usually talk to, and what I really like about Yakimchuk is his hockey IQ or something, and it's like we hadn't really heard that before, and so that bumps him up another level. I just think it's such an inexact science, and they've tried to make it more of a science, and there is something to that, but to me, it comes down to these players are 18 years old. There's still a lot that they've got to learn. There's still a lot of coaching they have to receive, a lot of development and skills work that they have to do. And it's, can you find something in there that really resonates with those players and brings out the best in them? Because again, they're all so skilled and so talented now that a lot changes really from draft day to the first time they strap on for an NHL game.
What's your general opinion of the probable starting six in Ottawa on the blue line? Jake Sanderson, Thomas Chabot, Artem Zub, Nick Jensen, and then Clevin and Matt and Palo. Is that enough? Like they took a step this year, they made the playoffs, but now they got to be thinking of raising the bar. Is that a six-man unit that is capable of going deep in the playoffs?
Um, yeah, how healthy are Zub and Jensen? And then what have you got? Because to me, what we saw last year, like I like that six. I really like that six. I think Clevin and Matt and Palo specifically took a step this year, but not only took a step, they kind of fit the mold. Like what do winning teams do? They have big, strong, mobile defensemen, and both of those guys. Like I thought Matt and Palo was found money this year. I mean, I didn't have him on the radar at the start of the season. Played well in Belleville. Played really well, I thought, in the Four Nations, and then down the stretch. And again, big right shot, moves well. Like those are things that you can't really teach. And so, if you told me that that's a six that they start the year with, great. But what does the depth look like after that? Does Yakimchuk then get thrown into the lineup when the first player gets hurt? And now it's you've got three young defensemen playing. You got one of them playing in your top four, which they're probably not quite ready yet. Can you sustain that for 15 games, 20 games? I don't think so yet. I'd love to be proven wrong, but to me, there has to be another depth piece added or a just in case, if you will.
I've been thinking about it a lot as the playoffs came to a close, and like everybody else, really impressed with what the Florida Panthers have done the last 2 years, doing it with skill, but also being able to trample you where necessary. And I thought about, okay, yeah, the starting six for the Ottawa Senators will they be able to handle the Sam Bennett's of the world? But and maybe this is the art of the GMing and the balance that's required. But if you're in a situation where you load up with all these big, tough defensemen, now maybe you're not mobile enough to beat, say, another team. So it's like you have to. The GM job is so difficult because you think you've got, you've cracked the code on the Florida Panthers, but now you haven't cracked the code on the Tampa Bay Lightning, right?
No doubt about it. But there's two things to that, I think. That who's going to shut down Sam Bennett on the Ottawa Senators? Who's going to shut him down on the other 30 teams in the league?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
nobody's found a way to shut them down, right?
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah.
That's why they're winning, because they play that way. If you look at it from the other side and you think, okay, well, who are the Florida Panthers? What was their defense core like this year? And Ekblad, fantastic. Seth Jones, revelation. Nico Mikkola, to me, has been a huge difference maker. Well, let's compare that to some of the guys in the Ottawa Senators. Jake Sanderson, to me, is better than all those guys. Just doesn't have the battle tested, like Jake Sanderson to me is a better player than Aaron Ekblad is because he's a better skater. He can play more minutes, but Ekblad's this warrior now that he wasn't like Aaron Ekblad was the first overall draft pick. He wasn't known as a and the same thing's kind of happened to Alex Pietrangelo over the course of his career, right? Like he won, and then it became all about how he's a battle tested, like physical, throws his body on the line. He wasn't that player when he was 21 or 22 years old. He was a skill guy who kind of realized what it takes to be a pro and to be a winner and to develop. And so I think that, that's in there with the Sens. Is Nico Mikkola a big, feared physical defenseman when he started in the league? Not really. When you play with a group behind you, that you've got somebody coming over your shoulder all the time, it's easy to be a little bit more physical. It's easy to lean on that stick, and can Tyler Clevin be that guy? Could Nicholas Matt-Paolo be that guy? Probably. Like I think that the pieces are there. And not because I live in the market and not because I go to games and I like the Sens. I like their makeup. I like their top nine. I like their six really now. I like Allmark. I'd like to see him healthy a little bit more. I'd like to see him consistent a little bit more, but I think that the pieces are in place. It's now time to show me.
I'm curious because we're talking about the Panthers, and I'd love a player's perspective on the notion of state taxes and the amount of money that's saved, and the weather there. Because Gary Bettman, when asked about it by I think it was Paul Bissonnette on NHL on TNT, he asked him specifically about the taxes, and Bettman seemed to treat it like it was a joke. Like, I can't believe people are even talking about this. That kind of an attitude about it. From a former player's standpoint, don't the Panthers and the Lightning and everywhere else where there's warm weather and low taxes, like, isn't that a massive advantage as you start to think about what might happen in free agency?
It is an advantage, no doubt about it. It's absolutely an advantage. But to me, it's specifically Florida and Vegas. Those two places, they're an advantage because winning matters first and foremost. Nashville this summer, Tennessee's got no state tax either. So they go out and they sign a bunch of guys and they don't have the recipe. And, Nashville finishes what, 30th, 32nd or 30th or 32. And nobody saw that coming. Well, they have a state tax advantage. They just spent a whole bunch of money. They went up to the cap. They've got a whole bunch of highly priced free agent signings. It doesn't mean that it's the number one thing, but your question was, does it matter to players? Yeah, it absolutely matters. Definitely. That's more money in my jeans. These careers are finite, and a difference between, especially on a big contract, it's a difference between $1.5 million to $2 million a year going home with you at the end of the season. Over an 8-year contract, you're looking at $16 million. $12 to $16 million. That's an awful lot of money to leave on the table. For a guy who's playing at the bottom of the lineup, and you're signing a contract for, call it 3 years at $2 million a year, a Nick Paul-type contract. Like that's life-changing money. You just got an extra 2 years on your deal. So to say that, like Bettman's comment that, it doesn't make sense or it doesn't matter to players. It doesn't matter the most. Winning matters the most, but you're kidding yourself if you don't think it really matters.
Right. Certainly, a quality organization matters for a free agent. And as we kind of talk about where the Sens are at right now on players, UFAs, pecking order, it sure is a lot different right now. Yes, we still have taxes that stink here. We still have weather that stinks here. However, if you're thinking, you watch the Sens and you've seen this evolution over the last couple of years with new ownership, the best in class philosophy. They're now back in the playoffs. How much more attractive is Ottawa than they were before the circus left town?
Yeah. Like, to me, by factors of 2, 4, 10 times more attractive than they were. And to me, the ownership makes a big difference. Staios is a serious guy. Travis Green is a serious coach. And to me, more than anything, it's Brady. Brady is a serious leader. Like, I think that, and part of that is what we see all season when he plays. Part of it is what we see in the community. Part of it is what we see in the interviews, all of that. But that's real. And I think that all the other players in the league, and with his brother and with his dad and with kind of the culture that the Kachucks have, it's not even that they preach. It's just that who they are.
Yeah.
You know, they are winners. They are competitors. And we're not going to allow our teams to not be good. You know, like the Keith Tkachuk interview a couple of years ago where he called out the team, like, do you think he's just doing that on a whim? Like, he knows exactly what the result of that is going to be. And it might be, I'm not real happy with this thing. I mean, it might be, my son's not real happy here. Or it might be, light a fire and let's get going. Like, we don't put up with this kind of thing. And, you know, I don't think I think it's great that Brady's in the stands watching his brother and seeing the celebration and the continuing to ongoing celebration. Because it's just so much fun to be a part of. And I think that, you know, again, between Andlauer, Staios, Green, Tkachuk, the pieces are in place. Like, now let's go, you know, and this culture thing that they've built down in Florida, that they've built in Vegas, that they've built in some other places, you can do that here. You know, you can create that if you've got the right people.
Yeah. Certainly, I think about Keith Tkachuk and his commentary along the way. I remember when Mark Stone was coming up for free agency and Keith Tkachuk was putting it out there in the media, you better re-sign this guy. And at that time, he was Brady's landlord/roommate, and he saw the mentorship. He saw the skill level. Maybe Keith Tkachuk, and obviously the circus was still in town and they didn't get that deal done, but maybe Keith Tkachuk needs to be, you know, getting involved in a coaching situation, or they get him as a I don't know, a motivational consultant or something here in Ottawa. But yeah, Brady Tkachuk is certainly, you know, maybe the 2 Stanley Cups in a row from his brother. Maybe that added another level of seriousness to his leadership. But forward is going to be an interesting thing because they still need more scoring. And we're talking here right now in days before free agency hits about the notion of maybe not re-signing Claude Giroux. And to me, Brendan, that's going to leave you with what? Like Cozens, Perron, and Zetterlund is your second line? Like, to me, I got Giroux better than all those guys still, even at 37. Like, do you think they're going to get things done with Giroux or maybe not?
You know, I thought so, and I expected so. Claude's a friend. I haven't talked to him about his contract status or where things. I haven't talked to him probably all year, but I know that, you know, he's got roots here. Like his wife's from here. The kids are raised here. He wants to be here. I don't think it should be a hard contract to do, you know, just because he still put up 50 points in 81 games last year. He's still a contributor in the lineup. Like, you still have to pay those guys. You're not getting them for $2.5 million a year. And I don't think the expectation should be that you could get him for $2.5 million a year. I think he gets double that on the open market, if not more. And so I am surprised it's taken a little while longer, but I mean, I've listened and read to the same things you have over the last number of weeks. And, you know, Sam Reinhart went to June 30th last year. And, you know, sometimes it takes a little bit longer than it should. And maybe, you know, like that. I mean, if we've seen anything from Staios and the regime here, he doesn't say very much and he's not leaking much. So maybe it is something as simple as, you know, a bonus here or a bonus there, and they're close on numbers and it just hasn't been announced yet. But I am frankly a little surprised that there hasn't been something done yet because, you know, I think that you've got 9 forwards signed up front for next year. They're going to backfill that with a couple of UFAs and guys that'll play, you know, 3rd, 4th line minutes. But to your point, I think G can still play, you know, he can fill in on top line minutes. He can certainly play second line minutes. He helps your second power play unit. He kills penalties. He wins faceoffs. He does all the things that you need. And he's a good, solid citizen. Like, he's a good teammate. He's a competitor. And I think you want guys around like that. So unless the ask is crazy, which I don't expect it would be, I think that's a deal you got to get done.
You mentioned the bonuses, and yeah, I think it's Elliot Friedman that put it out there that bonus, whatever the bonus structure is, maybe the thing that's holding this up. He's 37, yeah, but he's also missed 1 game in the last 3 seasons total. Yeah. If you're Giroux, are you maybe even insulted that they're coming at you with bonus structures? Would you think that you, with 50 points still as an NHL player, you've missed one game in 3 years? Are you maybe even insulted that they're coming at you with bonuses instead of a fully guaranteed contract?
Slightly, probably. Yeah. And I mean, I don't think I'd be insulted enough to walk out the door. And I don't think Claude would be either. You know how this game works and the way the contract negotiations go. But, you know, 81 games last year. It was his first year in a Senators uniform that he missed a game. 82 the year before, 82 the year before. If you look back through his Philly stats, like he's durable. He plays a lot. And, 50 points last year, 64 the year before, 79 the year before that. Okay, that's 15 points a year he's dropping off. So if he drops off again next year and he's at 35 points, still a pretty good contributor, isn't it? Like, you know what guys that get 35 points a year are getting paid over the around the league? I think that it's still a pretty good contract and a guy that you want to have wearing a Sens sweater next year.
Yeah, just as a real glance at things, it always seems to be I don't know, roughly $1 million for every 10 points you score in the league. It's obviously there's, it sways wildly, but that's sort of what I was going to, okay, get 50 points. That's probably $5 million. But yeah, we'll see how it all goes. And certainly I think it's actually important that they get Giroux signed, barring a big trade or a free agent acquisition. But I feel like if you go free agent shopping, Brendan, for Claude Giroux's replacement, you're probably paying more than what Giroux would be asking for here, because there'd certainly be some level of hometown discount. I think he wants to stay. You go out and try and replace him in free agency, you're probably looking at $1 million or $2 million more just to get another Claude Giroux.
And is he better? I don't know who else is really out there that fits that same mold of that age. And he's not a speed demon by any stretch, but I'd be curious to see what the comparable is based on 15 goals, 35 assists. What are your comparables throughout the league? Okay, Nick Ehlers. Well, he was hurt all year, and he's one of the premium free agents this summer. Nick Ehlers is going to make 9 this year. So is Claude Giroux not half that player?
Yeah.
For the production and for where he's going to fit in your lineup. It's always, to me, an interesting time of year. And generally, you don't see a lot of contracts where you think like, "Ooh, that's a mistake," one way or the other. I don't see anyways. Like I know the way the NHLPA works, and there's a guy named Roland Lee who runs the contracts for the NHLPA, and they'll tell you, whether you're coming up to arbitration or you're coming up to free agency, like these are your comparables around the league, just based on the advanced stats that we have, based on your numbers, based on this, based on that. This is what you should be expecting. And it's not very often that you might be on the low end of that range, or you might be on the high end of that range, depending on who wants to sign you. But there's not a lot of contracts that I've seen over the last 5 or 10 years that really, Jeff Finger contracts, if you will. Like that doesn't happen.
That was the Leafs acquisition from Colorado back in the day. $3 million, was it?
It was.
Wow.
I think it was more than that. I think it was 4.4.
Wow. Yeah, that did not work out very well. And I think about Giroux, one last thought as I kind of transition here a little bit, because I want to ask you about Dylan Cozens. Like Giroux sitting here and looking at that second line as I laid it out. It may not be that, but that's to me what it looks like right now. All those three guys I mentioned, with Cozens in between Perron and Zetterlund, if it is that, they're all north of $4 million, and Cozens comes in at over $7 million. And if they're coming less than $4 million, he'd be going, I got better stats than all those guys. I might be a better two-way guy, and I'm a better face-off guy. So it would be interesting to be a fly on the wall on the negotiations. But on the Cozens front, what did you think of the trade? Josh Norris for Dylan Cozens, center for center. You have one guy who's more physically resilient because Norris has obviously run into injury trouble. But you got Cozens for a long time now, and he's very expensive. What do you think of him?
Yeah, you know what? I really like Dylan Cozens, and I really like Dylan Cozens because of kind of that Brady Tkachuk aspect. And we're not putting them in the same category here at all. But there's just that compete that Dylan Cozens will fight, Dylan Cozens will hit, Dylan Cozens will get in after whistles, will do those things. I think that that this group is building towards being a team that can win rounds in the playoffs, and I think that Dylan Cozens helps that. And so. I was a Josh Norris fan. Obviously, the injuries, kind of derailed the launch of his career with the Sens, but he still put up numbers when he played. He was a solid contributor. Like, I mean, that shot on the power play is going to be missed, no doubt about it. But it was one of those trades that I looked at and thought, okay, like I get it from both sides. Do you feel like you're maybe giving something up a little early on Norris? maybe a little bit, but you've also seen the injury history, and you see him kind of, he's in and out of the lineup, and where does he fit going forward? I really, really liked the deal at the time. And I had quite a few arguments or discussions with people who just flat out didn't like it. And we kind of, by the end of the discussion, it's like, okay, well, I'm still sitting in the same spot I am, and you're still sitting in the same spot you are. And I guess I've got a little bit more respect for your position, and you've got a little bit more respect for mine. And that's okay. That's what a good trade is. It's supposed to be. I can't really tell you who won this one just yet. Let's watch 3 years from now. But you're right. It is a big number, and it's typically something that we're not accustomed to in the Ottawa market. Like there's a number of guys here now that are getting paid $7-8 million, and the cap's going up for sure. But this is not a cap team, and it's not a cap market. And so at a certain point, and I think with Michael Andlauer, I think that if you push towards, we're winning second rounds now, you're playing in conference finals, it might push to a cap team. But at this point, I don't think you're ever going to get to the point where they haven't won a playoff round in who knows how many years, and we're pushing on the upper limits of the cap.
I think about Norris, and in the time leading up to the trade, probably for almost a year and a half, I was talking in terms of, okay, Shane Pinto is really, Norris must be feeling footsteps a little. He's protected a little bit by his contract, but Shane Pinto's numbers aren't dramatically different. And it became, for me, an issue of like, okay, who's going to be the long-term answer at second line center? And then the trade happened, and for the foreseeable future, it'll be Cozens. And I said this in the last episode, Brendan, like part of the art of being a GM is finding the guys out there that are undervalued, the guys that haven't erupted yet. To me, mm-hmm. Pinto looks like one of those guys that when he gets the opportunity, and as he gets a little older, he may be maybe even more than people think. He's already pretty popular in this town, but right now there's a guy that's not getting any power play time, and he still contributes out there, and with some power play times and some good looks in the top six. Won't be this year, or at least the start of this year, but that doesn't that look like a guy that looks like he might be even, a bigger value than people think?
100%. And I think that's widely recognized around the league. Like he's now played in world championships. He's played in tournaments where, a lot of people are starting to see what Shane Pinto is really all about. And then, just as you were asking the question earlier, I thought, well, is Dylan Cozens really their second line center for a long time going forward? Or are you paying a lot for a third line center going forward? And is that something that the Sens saw coming? Because, there's a lot of teams and a lot of really smart people in this league that believe you build through the middle of the ice, you build through your defense core, that it's never, you can never have too many good, solid centermen. Well, I agree with that, but you can spend too much money up the middle of the ice on just a couple of players or on a handful of players. So, I think that Pinto, he hasn't had that breakout season yet, if you will, but he's right there. And he is so good all over the ice. Like, and there's more offense there than I think we give him credit for. Like, I think that it's coming real soon, that he'll be a guy that's putting up, 60 points a year, 65 points a year, potentially in a Selke conversation, depending on how this team does going forward. But I think there's still a lot of room to grow, and there's still a lot of, I don't even want to say it, like untapped potential is the wrong term, because I think it has been tapped, and I think people are starting to figure out how good Shane Pinto really is.
Yeah, I love him at center, and if Cozens maintains that position for the foreseeable future, and I agree with you, that's an if for me, given how good Pinto is. I think you may have to start experimenting. As much as I love him at center, you have to make room for him in your top six before long. It'll be interesting to see how they proceed with that. A couple of other things as we start to land the old plane here, Brendan. The Florida Panthers obviously were a tremendous team. 2 straight Stanley Cup victories. Probably everybody, as they build this summer or retool, they're all thinking about, we got to be more like the Panthers, more like the Panthers. But the forgotten team in all of this is the Edmonton Oilers, and losing 2 straight. And what will become of Connor McDavid? Do you think this time next year he'll still be an Edmonton Oiler, or will he be looking for something else? He just seems so frustrated, banging our head against the wall, trying the same effing thing. And what do you think with McDavid's future?
I do think he'll be an Oiler. I don't necessarily think that it'll be an 8-year contract. coming his way because I don't think that's what he wants. I think he's in a unique position where not a lot of guys in the league are, where, you know, you've got to show me, Oilers, that you believe that we can win. And I think really, you know, it is a copycat league, and Florida has just found this mold and recipe and really group, like a roster that can do it and that believes in it, and created this culture that just is relentless. And they're such a team, like they're a family, really. And you know, Edmonton to me made some strides this year. Like they got some depth scoring, and it dried up a little bit towards the end of towards the finals. But they added some pieces that helped. They added some pieces that didn't help. But they were better than 30 teams. You know, they lost, and we kind of look back at, you know, the game 3 loss was lopsided, and then game 5 and 6 they weren't as lopsided scoreboard wise, but they were lopsided because Florida just suffocated and smothered. And that was why you saw Connor McDavid come out and show a little bit more frustration than he normally did, because, you know, 90% of the time it works. Like I'm just going to start ripping around the neutral zone. Evan Bouchard's going to come up the ice slowly. He's going to put on my stick. And at one point, and that was my prediction at the start of the series, like Connor McDavid's going to win one game on his own. And the Edmonton Oilers could win the Stanley Cup because he is that good. Florida just suffocated him. They did not give him the opportunity. And who's done that before? Nobody's done that. Like, he's always had one game in a best of 7 series where he just dominates, or Leon dominates, and those guys will steal one for you. And they just weren't able to against Florida this year. So frustrating that, you know, frustrating for the Oilers and for McDavid from the perspective of, this works. This usually works. You know, what we did or what we do usually works. And it just didn't work this week against these guys because they're that good. And so I can't think of a situation where Connor McDavid could walk onto another team and that automatically makes that team better than the Florida Panthers. Like, you still have to beat these guys. Somebody's still got to beat these guys. And so I think that he sticks with Edmonton, and him and Leon have got such a special thing going on there but it's more about, okay, what are you going to do? What are you going to do with the goalie? What are you going to do? Like, how are you going to find some more depth for us on defense? How are you going to find a couple more guys that can score up front and be reliable and be contributors, for 82 games a year and then through the regular season? It's time for you, Edmonton, general manager, president of hockey ops. It's time for you guys to show me what this commitment's all about.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting for sure. And I think about that Florida Panthers recipe. It's mad science, you know, because the copycatting will happen. But even if you do it, like even if you take it right down to player by player, I'm going to burn down my team and I'm going to look at what Florida's roster's been these last 2 years, and I write down every player on the team. I'm going to put down their strengths, their style, all their intangibles, their point production, and I'm going to match it player for player on my roster. Well, you still have the intangible of what's between their ears and the chemistry with other players around them, and you could do that exercise and you could still come out with a team that might miss the playoffs. So it's it's craziness, like your Nashville Predators example. How the hell did they have the season they had while going out and getting these guys who've won cups in other places? They're not just, you know, they weren't just picking fantasy hockey players. They were picking cup winners. It should have worked, but it didn't.
Yeah, no doubt about it. You know, and you've heard Paul Maurice talk about it over and over and over, but now you hear all of the players talk about it too. You hear Bennett talk about it, Chuck talk about it, Verhaeghe talk about it, Marchand talk about it, that there's just a belief and a resilience to that group that we're not going to let anybody beat us. We're not going to let anybody ruin what we've got here. And they just, you can see it in the way they play. They care about each other. Little things matter to that group. Like every guy contributes. There's not very many guys that have an off night. When they do have an off, look, Alexander Barkov, it might be one of the most consistent players in the league. He wasn't his best in the finals. Didn't matter because the rest of the group surrounded him, and he wasn't bad by any stretch. He was still doing he was still winning his battles, winning faceoffs, doing all these little things. He just didn't score as much as he normally does. Somebody else puts their hand up and says, I'll go do it. You know, no problem. I got you tonight. Like there's just something special to me about that team, that group, and what they've created over the last couple of years in Florida.
So finally, do the Sens take a step forward next season? More of the same, just kind of get in, lose in the first round, maybe take a step back? What's your expectation for next year?
I think it's a step forward. Like
Good.
I believe in the group. I think that they've got the right pieces in place. I think there's going to have to be some things that happen here over the next month or so, in terms of backfilling the roster, in terms of finding some people, whether it's signing Giroux, whether it's finding a couple of guys that can fill in the depth situations, maybe another defenseman. Who's the backup goaltender? What does Olmark look like next year? Can he play 55 games? In terms of health wise, and then can you find somebody else that'll play the other 27? Or is it, are you looking at a goaltender who's going to play 35 to 37 and Omar, you can count on him for 45? I don't know what that's going to look like. But again, to me, the pieces are, like you got Brady, you got Stützle, you got Batherson, you've got Sanderson, you've got Shabbat. Like I really like Clevin and Matt and Paolo. There's a bunch of stuff here that, to me is part of that recipe for what a successful team looks like. So I think they're a playoff team. The tough part is they play in the Atlantic Division, which, like Detroit's going to get better at some point. Buffalo's going to get better at some point. Boston is, going the other way, but they're still Boston. And then you've got to beat Tampa, Florida, and Toronto, so how do you get past that first round? And it's one of those things where you're just in a murderer's row of a division right now. But I think they will. I think they probably learned something this year, towards the end of that series. Like if that was a 4-game sweep, to me, that was worst case scenario for the Sens. You win a couple of games, you get that feeling, you get like you save that excitement in the community, and they made the playoffs, and then it was about to be over so quickly that it was kind of like, really, guys, like we got everybody was so excited, and like this city's different, right? It's electric when the playoffs start. At least we got a couple more games out of it, and I think that there's going to be a desire and a willingness to do more of that.
It should be fun for sure, and it's been fun talking to you. Some great analysis there, Brendan. Will there be any opportunity at all for some downtime, some cottage time, whatever it is, or is it all summer hockey all the time?
No. Things slow down here a little bit. I think first week of July, things will quiet down, and I'll try to get out to the golf course, try to get out on the river a little bit, and then we start it all back up again in the middle of August. So there might be a window at some point, but you know what? I'm totally okay with that. I love it. And so do they. So do the kids.
That is awesome. I keep wondering, like, because I went through it as well on with the Nepean Girls Hockey Association, and they got these mid-August tryouts. I'm like, you guys know the NHL doesn't start training camp until like the third week of September, right? You're aware that the league doesn't start till October. What are you going to do? It is what it is, but it is a lot of fun and a memorable point in the kids' lives and yours as well. We appreciate you being here today, Brendan, and look forward to having you on the show again real soon.
Yeah, happy to sit with you. Good chatting, Steve.
That will do it for this week's program, and I want to remind everybody that our website is sensnationhockey.com. Don't forget as well that you can check out the hockey news, Ottawa, thn.com/Ottawa, all kinds of cool Sens articles as we get ready for free agency and the draft. Thanks for being with us, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll talk to you next time.